Our guest this evening is Dr. Nicki Verploegen. She holds a doctorate in spirituality and has been giving retreats in spiritual direction for over 20 years. She's authored several books, including Planning and Implementing Retreats, a Parish Handbook, and Organic Spirituality, a Sixfold Path for Contemplative Living. That one I snapped up from the bookstore at the Retreat House when I was on sabbatical. She has served as Director of Spiritual and Ministerial Development and visiting professor at Weston Jesuit School of Theology in Cambridge, Mass. Presently, she teaches courses in spirituality in graduate schools all around the U.S., including the Archdiocese of Boston's Diaconate program. She joins us this evening to discuss how any of us can grow in a relationship with God, no matter how busy we are, by finding a contemplative lifestyle. Dr. Nicki Verploegen, thanks a lot for joining us here on the Busted Halo Show.
Hi, I'm delighted to join you. It's good to be.
So you're in the Massachusetts area. Brett is from Cape Cod.
Oh, very nice. Very nice.
Yes, it was very nice in the summer, not as nice in the winter, but I'm not complaining.
Well, I'm lucky. I love snow, so bring it on. Bring it on.
Okay.
Now, normally, Nicki, I know you've been involved in the sabbatical program that I attended this spring for quite a while. Normally, you get a little break from the Boston winters to head down into the desert. I've got a little desert background for you on my Zoom.
Looks beautiful. I love it. I love it.
But this year, because of COVID, we saw you just like we are right now on the Zoom. That was good, though,
Right.
still.
It worked okay, huh?
Yeah.
Still present.
I am interested, before we give some good, I would love to give some good content to our listeners about something I think is elusive for a lot of people, which is how can I find time for spirituality in my busy day? I find it interesting, your sort of path to what it is that you're doing now. You oftentimes not only teaching in diaconate programs and seminaries and things, but part of your ministry is to help out people that are in many ministerial and or helping professions that just need a little break themselves. Like even, everyone from ministers who work for the church or people that are actually missionaries overseas and all that. And you're sort of the minister to the ministers, I guess.
That's right. That's right. We started an organization several years ago when we were visiting Zimbabwe, and we were ministering, giving retreats, and it became really clear to us that a lot of the caregivers who work in different countries like that, no one takes care of them. There are plenty of people taking, that are caregivers who are providing care for people in difficult environments, but no one takes care of them. So we started an organization. We call it Tatenda, which Tatenda means thank you in one of the Zimbabwean languages. And Tatenda International is responsible for caring for caregivers. And we go in and we bring in free of charge retreats to replenish them in spirit and in body and in mind. And so I've been doing that since 2007. It's taken me to like 10 different countries.
Whoa. And
we spent a lot of time overseas.
And do you find that, obviously it's very different from, for instance, offering a retreat to ministers in Boston, a busy urban American, metropolis.
Yes.
Would people be surprised, though, different in what ways, do you think?
Oh, well, for one thing, they're just so grateful for anything that you have to offer. There's very little resistance. And, in some cases, you'd expect a little bit of resistance because usually we're lay people doing this. We're not religious sisters or priests or whatever. And so lay people coming out and giving a retreat, what can they teach us,
What do they know?
So we've had a lot of fun getting, the barriers down that way. But then once we do it, once we're together, the things just thaw and we just are having a wonderful time. And they're long retreats. Usually they're like 8 days, 7 days. So we have a chance to get to know people really well and form friendships.
Dr. Nicki Verploegen is our guest here on the Busted Halo Show, and she was one of the presenters on the sabbatical program that I took. And while you were there, you gave us several days. You were with us for several days. And in addition to, quote unquote teaching, also led us through a good number of prayer exercises. And one of the things that I was particularly attracted to is illustrated in your book called Organic Spirituality, a Sixfold Path for Contemplative Living. But I think it's probably good whenever we even use a jargon word like that. I think plenty of people have either positive or maybe even negative or unknown or just ignorant reactions to it. When we say contemplation or a contemplative life, I know plenty of people do tend to mistakenly associate that with some, things that the church
Monastery.
condemns, or, Eastern things that take hold of our minds. If we don't empty your mind, the devil might get in or something. But when we say contemplative, what's the kind of broadest way in which we can really approach that term? Because I think, again, even on the positive side, people might think, well, I don't have like 20 hours a day to sit, staring at a cactus like Father Dave did for 2 months. How I couldn't possibly have a contemplative life.
Well, yeah, I think that there's a misunderstanding that contemplative means inactive. But really, in this day and age, we understand that contemplative is the complement to an active life. And the only way you can sustain an active life, whether it's in ministry or child rearing or whatever, you need to have a balance of both action and the contemplative. And the contemplative is that part that allows you to kind of focus on slowing down and entering into a deeper level of awareness and appreciation and gratitude. And it's usually a quieter form of spiritual life. You usually try to use everyday things, but you're sort of pulling back from the noise of life that you live in, disconnecting, pulling back. And in that pulling back, you enter into a deeper awareness of the life that is around you, and that fosters gratitude, and that sets you up better for prayer.
Well, in your book, Organic Spirituality, A Sixfold Path for Contemplative Living, you identify 6 things, and they all begin with S. Makes it easy to remember, makes it good on the
That's
PowerPoint.
right.
So
I did that on purpose.
slowing down, sharing our stories, stillness, solitude, surrender, and solidarity. And I loved your example of slowing down, because you describe yourself as a pretty fast-paced, kinetic person. And something as easy as, and this might, kind of surprise people, but something as easy as, you know what, I'm going to choose, even though I normally walk. Now, Brett will make fun of me because Brett, you'll appreciate this, Nikki. Brett says when I go on retreat, because I've been going on retreat to that place in Tucson for my personal retreat for several years. And Brett usually describes me in my normal life as more like a hummingbird.
Yeah. It's all over the place. And that also includes how often he needs to eat to keep the energy up, to be able to buzz around like that to all the different feeders.
But Nikki, when you talk about slowing down, I mean, again, I think to make it manageable for people that think this is just impossible for me to do these, solitude, silence, I can't possibly do all these things. But slowing down, you give a great example of just, walking down the hall to your next appointment with a slower pace is one way to just start that.
That's right. And I often encourage people to pick one little activity, like brushing your teeth. How many of us brush our teeth? Quick, it's done, it's finished. And I say, bring some awareness to it. When you brush your teeth, some children, they get them counting or that sort of thing. But when you brush your teeth, bring some awareness, or when you eat good food, slow it down. Most of us inhale our food. So if we just take a little bit more time to savor, and I think that's another S word. It's not in those 6 S's, but it's implied that when you slow down, you're more able to savor whatever you're doing, whether it's walking or eating or brushing your teeth or taking a shower. Just savor the gift that is. And that, again, opens the door for gratitude.
And those go hand in hand with some of the other things. Probably a good number of people listening right now, if they've had any experience with kind of a spiritual director or a retreat or prayer life or something, would have heard of kind of the traditional things that we've heard for centuries, which is silence and solitude. That we need silence in order to listen to God, and solitude to kind of be alone with God. And again, I think those immediately tend to be deal breakers, or people think they're deal breakers in our modern life, because, how could I ever possibly have any silence? How could I ever possibly be alone? Interestingly, though, and I think we talked about this during the sabbatical, that many people had experiences for the first time during this year of pandemic of actually being alone and having solitude.
Right. That's right. And appreciating it on a certain level. I mean, certainly it's been a stretch for us
Yeah.
because it's been imposed. But certainly, I think one of the things I like to point out is silence is the S word, but the word that I use in the book is stillness, because there's different ways to slow ourselves down and enter into some quieter place where we're still inside. Most of us our heads are going zing, 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 zing as well, like a pinball or something. And so to breathe, to take a breath, and that's kind of what I think we all did during this pandemic. We were invited to take a breath, to sit back, to breathe, to settle in, relax, enter into sort of a contemplative rhythm and a contemplative awareness of good that is there. And so that's part of what this contemplative thing is. It's waking up, awakening oneself to the presence of God within all these things.
Well, in fact, you say, and I preached on this, I quoted you this weekend in my homily with the respect of stillness. And you and I even had a conversation about that I really hooked into that for me. Because not only as an extrovert, but also a radio host, you know, I mean, I don't make my living or spin my ministry as one of the monks who's copying the scriptures like in the corner over there.
In this form of your ministry, you're not even allowed to be silent.
That's right.
We can't.
So for me, I really connected with the stillness. So the piece that I read in my homily this weekend is how you described stillness as a state of being rather than a mere lack of sound. To be still requires more than just silence. It's a complete investment of self and a cessation of inner clamor as well as external noise. That one I think most of us can relate to. Oh, inner clamor. Yeah, I know exactly what she means. So
that noisy thing going on in our heads.
But that may sound great. That might sound like a great goal to people that are listening right now. They go, oh boy, I wish I could do that. How do I do that? How do I cess my inner clamor? Cease. What are ways in which we can move towards that?
I do think that stillness and solitude really do go hand in hand. And I actually think that slowing down is also a sister discipline that helps us. Like all three of those help us practice each of them, you know? Yeah. So you slow down, you enter into you calm down, you settle, you breathe. Maybe you close your eyes, you take in a couple of deeper breaths and physically allow yourself to sink into the chair, and then allow your mind to follow that same path down into the depths. And sometimes we need some kind of image to anchor us there. Maybe it's a particularly important place that helps us to slow down, or a particular religious icon or but it doesn't have to be religious. It can be something like that organic desert behind you. It invites you to slow down, breathe, open up, relax, and receive what the breath of God is breathing into you.
Well, and you say, again, in your book, Organic Spirituality, talking about this concept of stillness, you say in the practice of stillness, we intentionally limit the stimuli that distract us. We choose to turn off the radio in our cars when we drive, give ourselves the joy of quiet. And there's so many other ways. When you say the word stimuli, I really zeroed in on that because what research has showed us is that what a lot of the social media and other things on our phone, like games and stuff like that, really plays on the parts of our brain that get stimulated and go, ooh, look, another heart, another bling, another message, that little sound comes in. It means somebody loves me. And we almost live for this stimuli in our modern world.
Right. It's addictive. I do think the stimuli in contemporary world is addictive. I remember being in Africa working with some seminarians in a relatively rural area. And one of the seminarians came in and confessed that since he'd been in the seminary and he had access to like Facebook and other online things, he had become addicted to the stimuli of all of that. And so we had to talk about what was the way in which he was going to disconnect from that, how he was going to make a choice for the contemplative dimension in his life by pulling back from it. And it's a hard thing to do.
Yeah. Yeah. But we've seen though, even secularly, people talk about, sometimes you'll see some of the social media influencers, whether they're, these teenagers that have a billion followers, or even somebody like very popular, like a J-Lo. You'll occasionally see people saying, "No, I'm going to take a little step back. I'm going to, be 2 weeks without posting anything. So don't have a cow.
Don't panic. Yes.
Don't panic and all that." So, I mean, there's even a recognition of this aside from God, spirituality, contemplative life, anything.
That's right. That's right. It's human health. It's important for our health to pull back from the stimuli and create a boundary around us at times and just breathe. I mean, think of being in a hammock swinging someplace where you don't have any responsibilities. I mean, it's just like heaven. I think I'm going to add hammocks to my request for heaven.
There you go.
I have a
Okay.
list that I've started for God, just to give God a heads up of what I want. Maybe I'll add hammocks as well.
It's kind of like a registry when you get married.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I'm checking.
Kind of send it along to him.
Made a list.
Make a list.
Caribbean water, lobsters, wine.
Hammock.
I do think it's funny that you think you'll still need a list. It's God. He probably knows what you're into. But I do like writing it down.
He says, go ahead and do this, but I already have it.
I already have it. Yeah, I got it right here.
What do you need? Got it.
We're talking to Dr. Nicki Verploegen, and her book is Organic Spirituality, a Sixfold Path for Contemplative Living. We talked a little bit about slowing down and stillness and solitude. Boy, the one that I bet a lot of people get stuck on, and I'm going to have to admit, Nicki, me too, is one of your S's in this sixfold path, surrender. Oh, boy. That's a tough one. What are
That's the hardest one.
If that sounds like
because
too
we
much,
like being
if it sounds like too much
control.
to people, what are ways, even just the examples that you gave before about disconnecting for a couple of days on social media or walking slowly to work? What is a really accessible way in which we might be able to practice baby steps of surrender?
Yeah, start small. Yeah, start small with surrender. When you find yourself clinging to something, again, it's this breathe, take a breath, sit back, and lighten up. And what I like to do is I like to take my hands and shake them out, because sometimes I start grabbing on to things, and surrender means letting go. So little ways in which we can practice letting go of my preference for the way things have to go, letting go of the way even I want mass to be, or letting go of the foods that I prefer. We had so much letting go. We had so much surrender that we practiced during COVID. So we should be a little bit better at it. So
You'd think.
it should come a little more naturally to us after all these months, huh?
For all these, here it is.
Letting go.
Surrendering.
Yes.
And it's also the ways in which, I mean, really anything, it may sound like an extra credit thing. Oh, people that are really good at faith or prayer or God or those other really holy people, they might be able to do that. But I mean, it's really the most basic thing about God's invitation to us.
Yeah.
And it's what we saw way back in the Garden of Eden. God asks us to not be in charge of everything. God asks us to let him be God most times. And boy, we don't want to do that, huh?
It's kind of like him saying to us, hey, I tell you what, I'll take it from here, okay? Why don't you relax for a little bit, and I'll run it from here, and just trust me for a little bit. Trust me. But
that's a great way to because I think even just the word has a connotation for people that at some point I have to like relinquish, almost like Francis of Assisi, where I just lay it all down there in the square and I give up all my riches. And yet what I hear you saying is almost like what's that old country song, like Jesus Take the Wheel, like for 10 minutes. I can surrender for 10 minutes in my day. That's possible. And anybody can do 10 minutes.
Yeah. Let God take it. It's just fine.
Organic Spirituality, a sixfold path for contemplative living. In the couple minutes that we have left, I don't want to skip because I found it very powerful during the sabbatical. The last piece, and you went to great pains to say you don't necessarily follow these 6 things in order and do one before the other. But in a sense, they kind of do naturally flow or feed into one another. The last one is solidarity. And people may be surprised to hear that a lot of times we have these little compartments, even in the church and in our spiritual life. Well, people that are praying in monasteries do this, and then other people that are really into social justice, they help, with feeding people at soup kitchens and at the border. But for you, it's really all of a piece. That's and right. I actually did experience that over the 2 months of the sabbatical that we tended to do. In fact, it was after a couple of weeks after your presentation, we moved into really engaging in some social justice. We had a visit to the border ministry, the Kino border ministry there in Nogales, and visited some in Tucson, some social justice projects that are going on there. It's an artificial distinction to say I've got this sort of private me and God time, this silence and contemplativeness, and then something else to do completely different is serving God's people, and as Jesus commanded us to do, wash each other's feet. They're really all connected.
Yes, they are. And if we didn't have solidarity or sharing our stories, it would be a very introverted spirituality. But both those, the sharing your story and solidarity, break us out of that insularity into something bigger. It's where we connect. We enter into a relationship, really, in our minds, in our hearts, in our actions with other people. So we can be in solidarity in so many different ways. I used to just think it's socio-political solidarity, but there's lots of forms of solidarity. It's what you experience when you have a family reunion. Your family is entering into solidarity. They're telling you old stories of old Uncle Harry who used to do this funny thing, Or when you go to a funeral, you're in solidarity.
Well, I was just thinking, just stopping by somebody's house was, hey, I baked you lasagna because I know it's a tough time. You're probably pretty busy. That's a way in which we move out of ourselves. And that ideally, again, the basics of Christianity is that when we draw close to God, hopefully what naturally happens is that we then become more compassionate towards others.
That's right. We're reaching out. We're practicing what Christ modeled for us, connecting, extending the sense of relationship beyond just our little narrow life to a larger life. And the mystics write about this. So even there they are in their mystic place. You have this idea of them being kind of remote, but they're connecting with God and with the world and with the earth and with each other and people in need.
Well, if you thought that being a contemplative meant you have to give up everything that you do in your life, you are mistaken. So was I. And a way to get there, and at least take some baby steps, I think I definitely recommend. I ran out and bought it myself. Organic Spirituality, a Sixfold Path for Contemplative Living. Dr. Nicki Verploegen, thanks a lot for joining us here on the Busted Halo Show.
Thank you. It was good to be with you. Good luck as you transition back into your active life.
That happened like the day I got back.
I'm sure.
That's actually why we booked you now, because
he might forget it.
Get back into his hummingbird phase, and then we have you on the show and space him out a little bit.